The birth. The task of the mother cannot really be shared, it is shared with the child. Arriving at the hospital, we were met by a strikingly young midwife, a slim person. First there was a preventive medical checkup, and it became clear that the contractions were already very intense in terms of length and frequency, but the cervix was only a ridiculous 2 centimeters open. Ridiculous because 2 out of 10 centimeters. In addition, the amniotic sac was still intact. Once in the room, I felt very uncomfortable at first, and the room quickly became secondary. The room in and of itself became more and more lost. I decided to take a bath. The contractions felt more bearable at home. It was only during the bath that the mucus plug, a kind of plug to the cervix that prevents germ infections and usually comes off 2 to 10 days before birth. It looked like a tadpole, small, slimy, dark blood on it and yes, somehow compact. Valentin and I thought about going for a walk, hoping that the contractions would melt away and help me to deal with the stabbing pain in my back. But the room got more and more lost and life became contact, so after less than an hour I got out of the tub again, but got out and the pain and contractions started to increase. The pain was mainly in the lower part of my back, as if something was bumping against my spine. The pain was different than I had imagined. It was barely vaginal and not in the area of and around my genitals. The pain became so much more intense within an hour that I asked the midwife for an epidural. I wanted to know how my cervix was doing, how long the birth would take, whether the epidural was really not a disadvantage for the baby or a higher risk etc., and whether it was normal that the pain was so strong in the back and not vaginal. It was about 3 or 4 in the morning. The midwife informed me that the cervix was a good 5 centimeters, the birth could take another 5 or 10 hours, the epidural was really not harmful to the baby and no, normally the pain was not felt so strongly in the back. Somehow I felt like shit. I hadn't expected so much pain and especially not that I could be so sensitive to pain. I felt like a huge wimp. I didn't expect to ask for an epidural. I thought that it would be natural and good. Why I wanted to give birth naturally, I cannot say. I always claimed that I was afraid of a C-section and that it would hurt me more in the end, but somehow it wasn't. I just really wanted to give birth naturally. It was simply a wool. I was also afraid of an epidural because I felt that I might not be able to push properly or something, some mistrust of medicine. I wanted to do it without, had some form of ambition, although ambition is a disgusting word, that's how it was. This pain was unknown to me. I compared it to the pain of an eye operation I had when I was 10 years old, the worst physical pain I've ever experienced, but the contractions just felt much worse. Now I got dizzier and dizzier. My eyes started to poke out violently. I couldn't control my vision properly anymore and started to squint or to lose my pupils jerkily behind the eye. I didn't scream but a kind of inner whimpering began to spread. It was not despair yet, but a loss of control of a higher degree. I lost control, but could not yet realize the moment of the birth process. I realized that I needed an epidural at the very least. It had already been a few hours and nothing felt like brains or whatever, just pain in my back. Was I even at a birth? Valentin kept trying to keep me sane, asking me how he could help me. I was screaming inside, asking why I had to be the woman, why I had to give birth at all, why give birth naturally, why people cannot be bred in petri dishes. Then you could put very healthy food into the artificial umbilical cord and enjoy wine and cigarettes next door without any problems. Was all this care for me and my body, our baby, even necessary? Why do we go through this? Why are we women? Where does this body come from? As if everything but matter had played a role before and then suddenly it is all about the materiality of biology. It happened quickly, then the anesthesiologist was there, placed the catheter and shot something very close to my spinal cord. The pain lasted for another quarter of an hour, about 7 contractions, and then I became completely calm. Intimidated, I thought to myself that I probably would not have survived in another century as a woman giving birth. I was amazed that mankind had invented something as ingenious as the epidural. I was 100% clear again and felt the exhaustion of the last 4 hours for the first time. For the first time I saw Valentin again and realized that he too looked extremely exhausted. We both fell asleep. From a woman giving birth I became a patient in bed, a sick woman with tubes containing controlled fluids, completely exhausted and lying still, no more restless. Had I seen the situation from the outside, it would not have occurred to me that this could have been a birth. An hour later I woke up again and the pain slowly but surely came back. I was afraid, began to tremble. I told Valentin about my fear. What if this material pain came back completely? I don't remember exactly what happened then, because I put most of it in a strange back drawer in my brain, but I know that the situation started to repeat itself from the beginning. The midwife checked again and said that the cervix was almost 5 centimeters open and that the amniotic sac was still intact. The pain went full blast again. The new midwife came. The new anesthetist came. They injected me with another agent. I was patient, but it did not work. I suspected that the catheter was wrong, so a new catheter was inserted, a new epidural was given, another hour of sleep, and then Nina came. Nina, my beloved gynecologist, my cousin's best friend. 2 more hours of pain of highest sensation passed and suddenly I could not stop pushing. The midwife was under stress and noticed that I couldn't hold anything anymore. She inserted her hand into my vagina and used her fingers to snap open the amniotic sac. And finally, a gush of water came loose under me and finally the back pain was gone. Finally I let go. For the first time I felt like giving birth as I imagined it. The pain was finally with the sexual organ, vaginal. That was very relieving. There was a downward movement and I began to scream. It was like a wave of downward movement, as if all of my inner self had decided to become immobile and go out, go for a walk, and now. The internal pressure was so strong that I couldn't tell if it was feces, child, or internal organs falling out. Everything just started falling. Everything just wanted to get out, but my help was needed. I could not help at all. Even though so much pain flowed out of me in the battle of screaming and pressure, I came into a flow, a kind of trance. Not a deep spiritual trance, more like a field hockey player's scream trance. Of course I didn't like what was happening, but for the first time in the last 10 hours I knew that the birth was going to end and that it really was a birth. I had been so disappointed in myself before that I probably wouldn't have survived the birth in another century that I felt all the stronger now with all the screaming and pushing. I was already aware at that moment that the most brutal thing that had ever happened to me was happening to me, so violent and threatening I would not have appreciated nature. I was shocked and at the same time amused with incomprehensibility. I had underestimated the violence and now I was in the middle of this shit. There was no escape. The child just had to get out. Nina said that the head was almost there. I screamed my body out of my mouth again. Something tore in my vagina and there was the head. The body came in the next contraction. Sony was there, finally there. Sony was put on my chest, also a warm cloth. Sony screamed louder than I had screamed before. It was blue. Valentin cut the umbilical cord, which looked like a transparent cable with 3 Ys in blue, red and yellow. On Nina's instruction I pressed a few more times to eliminate afterbirth and all that came out. Then Nina informed me that my inner labia on the left side was divided into 2 and the outer labia on the left side was torn as well and she will now sew it shortly. But I didn't give a damn because of Sony. If before, during the birth, life became contact, now contact became life. You should still be paid for giving birth. Amen.